Good morning, welcome, 1,000 welcomes to you all. And we are meditating today on the subject, Activate Pure Love. So this is part of our series on pure love, and this is step 2. So I invite you, if you're interested in this, to reconnect with our first recording, which is a lot of fun. So that was 2 weeks ago. And we're picking up from where we left off there. So we're recognizing that pure love is the reality. So pure love is the energy of life itself. It's the foundation that each of us stands upon. And none of us would be here if it were not for that energy of pure love. And then we're inviting ourselves to connect with that reality and to live that realization right in the midst of our daily life. And so a couple of funny stories, a couple of heart-opening stories, a couple of sacred teachings. And for each of us, I'm just inviting us to connect within ourselves to the activity, the dynamic energy of pure love within ourselves. So it's that energy of joy and that energy of exuberance, that energy of aliveness. And it's present within each of us. And so I'm just inviting each of us to connect with that. What is that makes that wellspring of divine goodness, formless, pure energy, the energy of laughter, the energy of lightheartedness, the energy of wholeness, the energy of absolute peace, the energy of comprehensive bliss to rise up and to pour forth through us. So a couple of true stories, and these are shared online by people who were invited to share funny dad stories. And so I'm offering tribute to all the funny dad stories, all the funny parent stories everywhere, and inviting you. You might think of later, what funny dad stories or parent stories do you have? They might be ones you tell on yourself, and they might be ones that you remember from other points in your life. So these are true stories, and one of the people online shared that her dad whistled very loudly and liked to roll down the window, stick out his head, and whistle back at birds very loudly. And that this worked beautifully until the moment when a neighbor heard and called 911. Because she thought he was whistling at her. And so the police came out to investigate, and they reported back to the neighbor, "Ma'am, don't worry, he's not whistling at you, he only flirts with birds." So, in addition to just enjoying the laughter of that story, I'm inviting each of us to connect with that energy of wholehearted responsiveness to the song of life. And so one way to put it in words however you connect with it, but one way to put this is, I'm asking myself, am I whistling back at birds? Am I allowing myself to whistle back at birds? So am I allowing myself to roll down the window and whistle back at birds when birds sing to me? And so for each of us, this is the song of life. And it sings to each of us and connects with each of us in different ways, in completely delightful ways. And so I give myself permission to roll down my window. I give myself permission to allow life to connect with me and to meet me and to call to me and sing to me. And I also give myself permission, independent of the responses of neighbors, to whistle back at birds. In whatever way that song of life shares through me, I give myself permission to be full-throated in sharing the song of life, the way that the song of life shares through me. And so just connect with that energy. It's the energy of pure creativity. It's the energy of divine life itself. And it is within each of us. It's present at the base of the spine. It individualizes in expression through each of us. It also, as we rise up the spine, connects us with all of life. So it's absolutely pure energy. It is immortal energy. There is nothing that can tarnish that energy. And so we're inviting ourselves to connect with it. And then when we do, there's also resourcefulness and patience and kindness and good humor and the ability to let things go and to have The Ramayana phrases this: to have a pure heart, to have a strong soul, to have a quiet mind, to have clarity of purpose. When we have those elements, there's nothing that can stop us in our forward movement. And so just giving ourselves permission to consciously reconnect with those elements and those qualities. And then the second true, funny dad story is a story shared by someone who said, my dad put down a new floor for my brother in my brother's house, and no sooner was the floor down and looking perfect, then my dad started to lift the floor back up. And we all said, Dad, what are you doing? And he had noticed a little spider had gotten under the boards, and he didn't want the little spider to be harmed. He didn't want the little spider to be trapped, so he was taking up all of his handiwork. And so just like that tenderness, providing for the child and being aware of the tiniest forms of life as well. So I'm not literally telling you that you need to rip up your floorboards, but just to have that tenderness of heart, that courage within ourselves, and also just that tenderness of heart. And so for each of us to connect with that energy of courage and to connect with that tenderness of heart, giving ourselves permission to be that energy always, right in the midst of our daily life. Even if it looks funny, even if it makes people laugh, even if our kids then share true funny dad stories online about us. And so a couple of teachings, I'm starting to connect us with some teachings from the Yogic tradition, and then also teachings from Julian of Norwich, which coincide brilliantly with teachings from the Yogic tradition. Adi Shankar tells us that which pervades all the quarters above and below, which is existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute and non-dual, which is infinite, eternal, the one alone. Realize that to be Brahman. And so you can feel the wholeness, you can feel the allness, you can feel the upliftment and the aliveness that is present in that teaching. One of the ways that this teaching has been sharing itself this week with me is the awareness that bliss is comprehensive. And so I'm inviting us to tune into this. Bliss is comprehensive. Bliss is. Bliss always is. Which means that bliss has to be comprehensive. Bliss cannot be about what the separate individual container is feeling. Because we know this. The separate individual container sometimes feels pleasure, sometimes feels pain, sometimes feels connected with that comprehensive bliss, and sometimes doesn't. But the comprehensive bliss is. And so we are inviting ourselves, what the yogis say and what Adi Shankar is pointing to here, is to let go of the walls around our individual container. And when that happens, that's like rolling down that window, and then the bird song is right there in our beingness. The song of life is right there in our beingness. There's no barrier, there's no boundary anymore between us and the song of life. And so comprehensive bliss is able to be in us and with us and through us and as us. So this is letting go of the pain that the individual container might feel, acknowledging that sometimes the individual container feels pain or anxiety or sadness or dread or fear. And giving ourselves permission to acknowledge that, but also suspend our identification with that and reconnect with comprehensive bliss, which is always present, always. So Julian of Norwich offers a teaching that is very, very related to this. Julian of Norwich, a couple of different teachings. One of the things that she says is that the divine is within us. And so just allowing ourselves to feel how amazing that is. The divine is within us. We're never separate from the source of all bliss. We're never separate from pure love. So part one of what she says is the divine is within us. Part two, she says everything is within the divine. And so she ends up offering an extremely Vedantic teaching because that means everything is within us. And so the question then is, am I identifying with what I love? Am I identifying with what I would like to energize, what I would like to choose, what I would like to bring into fulfillment and into visible expression in my life and in my relationships and in the world? And so for each of us, it is that power, that ability to consciously choose, where am I focusing? On what am I directing my attention? So each of us has the choice always to roll down the window and allow the birdsong to be right there in us and with us and through us and as us, until we realize that there's never been a moment of separation. The song of life is always, always, always singing within each of us. Julian of Norwich also offers a teaching. She says that she's on her deathbed and she's in pain, and then all the pain melts away. And she says, I'd never felt better. I feel better than I've ever felt before. So she travels beyond the body, and this is what she sees. She sees something that is so tiny, it appears to be the size of a hazelnut. And inwardly she asks, what is that? And the answer is, it is all that is created. The whole universe, in relation to consciousness, existence, bliss, in relation to the divine, all that is created is the size of a hazelnut. And so just imagine, there's a couple of different entry points we can give ourselves here. What that means is that absolutely everything is held in the palm of the divine hand. Absolutely everything, the whole universe. But also, it can give us some excellent perspective if we realize that the whole universe is the size of a hazelnut. It can help us disidentify and sort of take less seriously and less heavily the things that we feel we have been carrying, the things that we feel have been weighing us down or holding us back. So it can help us realize we don't need to be held back by anything that is that small. So we can connect with the source of pure love. We can connect with that life energy that makes all things possible. That life energy that unfolds and is continually pouring itself forth in formless goodness and also in all forms. And so for each of us, giving ourselves the invitation, no matter what it is that we've been experiencing humanly, to feel, I am loved into this lifetime by the energy that upholds the whole universe. The energy that upholds the whole universe is loving me into this time and space, independent of how my human container feels. That pure love is universal. That pure love is comprehensive. There is absolutely nothing that can confine or block or limit that pure love. And so for each of us, imagine that all of the walls that are around your perception, that are blocking you from having that freedom of vision, that freedom of connecting always with absolute pure love, the walls just melt away. They just vanish. And there is only pure love. There is only comprehensive bliss. And you can feel how quiet things become. You can feel how the chatter of the individual human mind melts away. You can feel how there's no fear. You can feel how concepts and categories melt away also. And you can feel how we stand in the eternal, even when we are here in time and space. And so when we stand in the eternal, even while we are here in time and space, that's when that heart song, that life song, is able to share in us and through us and as us in whatever way it possibly can. And so we're inviting that pure energy to share through us in a way that helps us individually and collectively transform, so that we and all are able to live in liberation and peace. And I'm offering that teaching. It is a perennial teaching, one that we could offer any day of the year, according to the non-dual teachings of awareness in the yogic tradition. It's also a teaching that honors and celebrates Juneteenth. And so I'll just say the teaching again. We are connecting inwardly, each of us, with the living reality, the sweet, true reality, that liberation is, that freedom is, that peace is. That is what is always. And with courage and humility, we are also acknowledging each of us is invited to dedicate ourselves to ongoing individual and collective transformation, so that all may live continually in liberation and peace. Bringing the eternal energy of liberation and peace into lived realization in time and space. And so that's the practice of our lifetime. That's the purpose of our lifetime, for everyone, always. And it is a beautiful teaching to connect with and to remind ourselves of on Father's Day, Divine Parents' Day, and on Juneteenth as well. And also every day of the year. So if you want to put that in terms of an intention or a vow, I vow to dedicate myself to individual and collective transformation, so that all may live in liberation and peace ongoingly. I vow to remember that liberation and peace is. That is the sweet eternal reality. And I vow to speak and to think and to act and to choose in ways that make that eternal reality present in my life, in my relationships, in my workplace, in the way that I walk down the street, in the way that I ride the bus. Speaking of riding the bus, one of the teachings that I've been reflecting on for several weeks now comes from Dr. King. And this is a teaching that he shares, which is a wonderful reminder for all humans. And the teaching that he shares is, forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a permanent attitude. So he takes that teaching, he says that is one of the core teachings that Jesus offers. And he says that Jesus makes that visible with his life. Jesus waits until he's nailed to the cross, until he's tormented, until he faces shame and pain and opprobrium and blame, until he is subject to the most painful, torturous death that humans could devise. And this is all happening publicly. Then Jesus says, "Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do." So this isn't just a word that Jesus speaks. This is what he makes visible with his body. This is what he makes visible with his life. And so Dr. King says, forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a permanent attitude. If we follow the teachings of Jesus, if we follow the teachings of truth, this is what each of us must do. And so it is even less a doing, it is a being. if it becomes a permanent attitude, there's no choice involved anymore. It is simply what we are. And so I may find a few tears coming to my eyes when I share with you that Dr. King offered that particular teaching while he himself was in jail. So he was in jail, and he was in conditions in this jail. He said it was the worst he'd ever seen. So he'd seen a lot of jail because he was serving as the conscience of a nation. And his reward for it was he kept getting tossed into jail. And so he said this particular jail was dirty and ill-equipped, uncomfortable. And that's where Dr. King was when he was reflecting on forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a permanent attitude. Dr. King came to that teaching because he had lived through transformation within himself. And so if you look at his biography, if you look at his stories, he didn't always find it easy to be in that awareness that forgiveness was a permanent way of being. He had to go through the fire of transformation, the crucible of transformation within himself in order to be able to live that. And so there's a point earlier in his life where he's on the bus. He has a seat on the bus, and then he's forced to give up his seat on the bus because of the color of his skin. And he's forced to ride standing the whole way home. 90 minutes he's forced to ride standing. And the whole time he's burning with anger. And he realizes, I can't carry this anger because this anger is burning me. I am the one who is carrying this caustic anger. If I love myself and if I love the divine, I must transform this anger. And so he made of himself, he made of his life, a crucible that transformed that energy of anger into the energy of love, that transformed the energy of hatred into the energy of forgiveness, the energy of compassion, the energy of understanding. That, by the way, is the same thing that Dr. King is observing that Jesus did. When Jesus took that pain and that shame and that blame and said, after all of that, then Jesus said, forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. So a couple of ways to work with this, and I'm going to connect this with a teaching from the Ramayana as well. In the Ramayana, Ram is about to be crowned emperor. And then that close to being crowned emperor, he learns that instead he's being sent into exile in the forest rather than being crowned emperor. And he realizes that this is happening because of the request of his stepmom. But he refuses to be angry at his stepmom. He says, let us not waste our time blaming anyone. Let us acknowledge they are playing a part in the unfoldment of the whole. Let us focus on playing our own part as well as we possibly can. Let us follow with joy and willingness the spiritual path that is ours to follow. And so Ram, Dr. King, Jesus, Adi Shankar, and Julian of Norwich are all giving us this encouragement and this reminder that this is possible, to not waste a single moment of our time in blame, to have awareness, to have wisdom, To have clarity, as Jesus says, forgive them, they know not what they do. They know not, they will meet and directly experience the effects of what they create. And all of that is held in the palm of God's hands. All of that is the size of a hazelnut. So our only question, always, is how may I forgive? Anywhere in my life where I have been feeling pain, how may I forgive? Anywhere in my life where I have been feeling fear or anxiety, how may I let that go, knowing that I am loved into this lifetime, and all of existence is also loved into this lifetime? How may I joyfully and faithfully follow the spiritual path that is mine to follow? How may I choose peace and freedom? How may I choose liberation and harmony in a way that makes visible the sweet reality that peace and freedom, liberation and harmony are the real, true nature of every one of us. And no one, no matter who they are, no matter who we are, will ever rest in peace until we are living the fullness of that liberation and that peace and that harmony and that freedom and that joy and that forgiveness. So each of us is invited to activate pure love in a way that is permanent forgiveness, so that there's no longer even a choice. There is permanent love, so there's no longer even a choice. There is comprehensive bliss, even if the individual human container is experiencing something other than bliss. There is permanent clarity. There is courage. There is strength of soul. There is purity of heart. There is calm mind. There is the song of life itself, sharing in fullness in us and with us and through us and as us. And that same song of life reverberates throughout the whole universe. Thank God, and God bless us all.